Chuka Nwachukwu, the head of the fixed income trading at UBA, joins me now for some more market updates. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Chuka.
Thank you, David.
Let's start off the assessment we're going to have now with the highlights we saw this week from the OMO maturities, which did not necessarily excite the market, to the T-bills auction. Illiquidity still lingers some way, somehow. Quiet tone still remains in the market. Let's talk about the overall sentiment and the highlights for this week.
Okay, David, it's been an interesting week. We had system liquidity as we've not had it like this in a long while. The system was really liquid due to the FAC payment, and so that brought in bearish sentiment into the market, especially on the bond side. You know, the major activity for this week was the Wednesday NTB auction, where we saw about 190 billion was on offer and about 310 was sold. We saw also movement in drop in yield from 14.5 to 13.99. So, you know, by and large, it's been an interesting week, though with little or no much activity on the trading side of it.
Let's talk about investors' concentration of activities now within the short end of the curve and why this shift to the 2024 and 2026 papers. Initially, it was the 2032 and 2037 papers that really had the bigger interests.
Yeah, I think the interests on those shorter end of the bonds were just mainly to manage liquidity. Like I said, I mean, you know, people just trying to see how they can manage the liquidity rather than allowing CBN to debit at 0%. You know, you just buy the little instrument you can. So then the interest is still on the middle to longer end of the curve, especially the bonds that are on auction next week, which is the 2029. 32 and then 37. So everybody is looking forward to the next week bond auction, but I feel that yield will definitely either remain the same or move slightly upward.
And then we also see that the rates for the 91 and 182-day papers are not changing as well.
Yeah, it didn't really change much. I think the attraction is on the longer end. If you notice, the one-year bill, you know, the previous auction, you know, was more attractive to the investors, and so a lot of people just you know, concentrated on the attention on the longer end of the curve.
Chuka, we cannot have this conversation without not focusing on the pullback we've seen from the Naira's trading pattern against the greenback. Irrespective of what plays out at the importers and exporters windows, we have to acknowledge the pattern at the parallel market. We are seeing an improvement this week so far. It has been a sustained gains grounded where we are looking at the performance of the Naira. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the IE window is where the CBN is benchmarked, and then we've seen a slight appreciation on that window as well. But you talk about the parallel market, which is largely unregulated. So what you see on the parallel market, you see appreciation of the Naira at the parallel market. You know what, that for me, it tells me that most of the demand you see there are mere speculation, and so nothing really has changed, because if you look at all the fundamentals are still the same. There hasn't been much you know, inflow, so to say, or I mean, so it's purely for me mainly what do you call it, mainly speculative, and I believe that it will remain stable within the shortest period.
And still setting our focus ahead of next week, you made mention of the 225 billion Naira bond auction. We'll likely see how much of an excitement do you think that would also induce into the market, because investors are still sitting on the sidelines. We're not seeing a big pull.
The excitement is there because, I mean, everybody wants, every trader excitement is to see the yield move upward, and that's what we expect to see at the next auction, especially with the fact that after this week, not until end of the month, we will see liquidity. And so from next week, you know, the liquidity we've seen this week will thin out. And then, of course, we now see bearish sentiment come into the market, and that will make the yield inch up further. So I expect that the yield will move forward, move upward in the next bond auction.
And apart from that, what other forecasts do you also expect for the market as well, as we're going into next week, expecting inflation reports to also come in as well, and other details, aside sort of the third quarter earnings we've had at the start of middle to the end of last month and this month?
Yeah, talk of the inflation is one of the key drivers of bonds, activities on the fixed income market. And so we expect that inflation figure will go up. The last one came out at 20.77, and most analysts are looking at around 21.3 levels. So I believe that the inflation figure will drive the activity, going into the end of the year. We also have to keep an eye on the MPC meeting, which obviously will the inflation figure will affect the decision made there as well.
Well, there are some whispers that we might likely see the MPC retain the MPR at the current rate. What do you make of the next likely action and how this would also impact the market?
Yeah, I share the same view. I don't think there's a need for any hike or reduction in rate. Yeah, so I think that, even though we've seen that, I forgot to mention one of the parameters in fueling inflation is the food price, and then of course you notice that the flooding activity has greatly impacted negatively on the on agricultural sector, and so that is an area that we continue to influence increase in the inflation. So I think that MPC will probably just look at it to say, look, you know what, we've only just hike rate. Let's look at what happened to the end of the year, and then probably they will take a decision if need be going into the new year.